Today I'm joined with Joe Peters, who is a Republican candidate for Congress in the new 8th District. We're going to talk about Joe and learn all about what he stands for and why he believes you should elect him to be the next congressman in the 8th District. And Joe, thanks so much for coming on.
Gary, great to be here and to be here with your viewers.
So first of all, let's start a little bit of a background about you. You are no stranger to Northeast Pennsylvania, especially into the Scranton area. You were born and raised in Scranton and were for a long time a city cop in Scranton. You, of course, moved over into Wilkes-Barre to go to King's College.
I did.
Then you went to Dickerson School of Law, where you got your law degree, and then you worked for the Attorney General's office for a good chunk of years, an assistant deputy, an executive deputy attorney general, where you really worked hard in mob crime-related field and did lots of work in that field, and brought down a very large crime boss, correct?
Little Nicky Scarfo, who was the head of the Philadelphia crime family, and 15 other of his associates. We had a team of 5 prosecutors versus 17 lawyers, and the investigation went on for years. The trial was 3 months long. The jury had to be locked up for their own protection.
Wow.
Because of the threats to their lives and mine. And after 3 months being locked up in a hotel room and being in court 6 out of 7 days, the jury bravely convicted mob boss Little Nicky Scarfo and his henchmen. So
you are no stranger to the criminal justice system and sometimes what could be a little bit of hostile political arena. So you're ready for this. And then having worked in 2 White Houses, yes,
you know, where sort of the big leagues of politics and government, and I was proud to have done that, to be asked to serve. You know, when I look back at serving 2 presidents and serving 6 elected attorneys general in Pennsylvania, and as the son of a Scranton mayor,
yes,
a Republican mayor in a Democratic city, and that doesn't happen by accident. You do that by working with people. I look back on that and I think, well, why did all of these people ask me to serve? And I think it was not about politics, it was about the issues with which I was dealing. The drug issues, the issues of organized crime, and the issues of terrorism.
I was going to say, a lot of your background has dealt right around a lot of the major drug issues we've had here in our state. And right now, we're kind of facing that again with the opioid crisis. So we're going to delve into that and exactly how your background and what you've done so far really has teed you up to this position.
Very well said. People ask me, you know, why I'm running for Congress. And when I think of the answer, I think about the issues that we face as a society. And all of the loftier issues, you know, the economy and the things we all talk about in this sort of this big overall haze or malaise, none of that matters. We could have the best health care, we could have the best economy. If we don't have peace and safety and security in our homes and in our lives, then we don't have anything. And so as I talk to people about thinking about this run for the 8th Congressional District, I kept hearing the same themes. Number one was the heroin opioid crisis. And then I would hear from people about the homegrown terrorists, people among us who would do us harm. It used to be terrorism was about what happened overseas. Not anymore. It's about that 18-year-old in his basement, you know, who self-radicalizes on the internet and then becomes a bomber with a mind, you know, a bomb with a brain who can go out to a mall or a stadium and things like we saw in Las Vegas. So people are very concerned about that. And then people would talk about the police targeting an assassination by people. You know, when I raised my hand to be a Scranton police officer, I never would have imagined that police officers in America would be targeted for assassination. So when you think about all those issues, and I look back on my career, and I've been blessed to have worked with so many great people. You never do anything like that alone. But I think I was built for this job, to be able to, on the first day, with credibility, deal with the issues of the day.
And you know what, there a lot of what you said, like we said, has played into a major role for this. So I want to turn real quick and talk about the new 8th District. We had this big shakeup happen. Nobody knew what was going to happen, and finally we got the new map. We have the map here of the new 8th District, and this encompasses all of Lackawanna, Wayne, and Pike counties, and then a very large chunk of Luzerne County, along with a very large chunk of Monroe County as well. And in Luzerne County, you will, if you are selected and the voters decide to send you to Washington, you will represent the cities of Wilkes-Barre and Hazleton, Nanticoke, and Pittston, and of course a whole list of townships and municipalities, including locally right here, just about all of Hazel Township, Wilkes-Barre Township, Wright Township, Fairview Township, Freeland, Foster Township, and straight down through here, Whitehaven. This is a very large area. I think really maybe the 8th and 9th, we see how they split everything as well. In the 8th District, we're seeing some people will finally get a new congressman for maybe the first time ever, or for the 3rd or 4th time.
Right.
We have seen. What makes the 8th District so unique, and why have you said this is what I have to do? This is why I want to go represent these people, because they talk the language, they're ready to walk the walk, they're ready for a change.
Because I am one of us. And I think that's the most important thing, that we live in an area that is very proud of who we are. And I speak of the area, you know, Luzerne County, Lackawanna County, which, by the way, make up 65% of the votes in this new 8th Congressional District. And we as a people are, you know, we are religious, we're ethnic, we're proud of our ethnicity, we're proud of our politics. And when we elect a leader to serve us, we expect he or she to answer to us, not the other way around. And having grown up in a political family where my dad, as I mentioned, was a 2-term Republican mayor of a Democratic city, you lead people by bringing them together and kind of putting the politics aside and dealing with the issues. And in this race, you know, my opponent, John Schrin, a fine person, but he doesn't live in the district. He never has. He lives in New Jersey, and he finally bought a house 6 months ago in Pennsylvania, and it's not even in the 5 counties in our congressional district, much less Luzerne County or Lackawanna County. So I think people deserve somebody who is part of the fabric of their community, who knows their lives, knows their challenges, and is able and capable to deal with those.
How important, you know, for you, and you just made that statement, is it to have somebody who knows, who can walk through the towns, who know where the streets are, who know who the people are? How important is it, you know, for you or for anyone really, to have that person who you're able to know and say, oh, I know Joe, oh, I know his dad, you know, his mom? Have that person show the same respect and the same knowledge to go to Washington and fight for those values.
I think in your explanation, which was terrific, you've answered your own question. People want to know that, you know, we know this guy. We know what he's about. He's authentic. He's real. He is one of us. He gets our values. He knows the plight we live every day on so many different levels. You know, you wouldn't, if you wanted to, if you needed heart surgery, you wouldn't get an eye doctor who has never spent a moment looking at your heart. So why would you want a John Schrin who's never stayed a day, lived a day in this district before or even now, saying, oh, I want to be your congressman, when you have someone who is part of who you are?
I want to ask, why do you think we need a cop in Congress? Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would come up with a lot of reasons why we need a cop in Congress, but why do you think it's important to put somebody in Congress who knows the judicial system, who's worked in it, and who has been on the front lines for many years?
Well, and you said it well again. I should just leave this in. You're doing a great job, Gary. And your viewers across Luzerne County are probably thinking the same answers that are going around in our head. One, send a cop to Congress to clean up the Congress and to fix it from the bottom up, organically, from the inside out. You know, President Trump, whom I support, talks about draining the swamp. And I think you've got to clean it out and change the way it does business. And when somebody said to me one day, just in passing, we need to send a cop to Congress, that was what was on their mind. Secondly, I think that, you know, my number one issue is the heroin opioid problem, crisis in our society. And I've lived through all of the drug problems, you know, from being an undercover cop in Scranton and looking down the wrong end of a .44 Magnum and seeing what the drug culture was doing to our society, to see it evolve through all of the different drugs, and, you know, for how horrible we thought methamphetamine was. The heroin crisis of today is a completely different animal. It's a problem that starts, sadly, today with legitimate pharmaceuticals. It used to be, when I was working the streets and leading the State Bureau of Narcotics Investigation as its chief, that nobody wanted to be a heroin addict, because it was that image of someone in an alley with a needle in their arm, and homeless and destitute. Now, the heroin addict is somebody right next door. It's the person who got a root canal and got, you know, 30 Percocets from the dentist, whom unintentionally, because at the time they didn't know how addictive these pills were. Or it's the high school wrestler who hurt his back and the doctor gives, you know, 30 Oxycontins. We got to change that. You know, we have to say, no, doc, give them 6 and have them call you in 2 days. Because what happens, Gary, is that addiction, once it grabs you, leads you, once those prescription pills run out, to going from doctor to doctor to get pills. When that doesn't work, you buy them on the street for $50. That money runs out, and then you're delivered to the $10 bag of heroin. I think maybe the third reason we want to send a cop to Congress is to send somebody who's not beholden to anybody. And I'm not. Nobody owns me. There's no PACs that have given me money. There's no lobbyist that's going to scare me. The mafia wanted to kill me, and I wasn't afraid of them. I'm not going to be afraid of some wayward leader in the Congress who demands that I do something. I'm going to do what I think is right. I'm going to answer to my constituents, and I'm going to go there, you know, as the Associated Press called me and my fellow prosecutors after the mafia trial, a modern-day untouchable, in the sense that that's how I'm going to work. That's how I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote the right way for the people of the 8th Congressional District.
I want to go back onto the opioid crisis for a minute. You have experience, as you said, working with this and seeing over the years the different types of drugs who've infiltrated in the area. We've never seen something that has been this bad. And as you said, it's no longer just that guy in the alley. It could be anybody. It could be your neighbor, what have you. What would you do going into Congress to help curb that problem, to help clean up the streets of many of these cities? You know, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Hazleton, they all face the same problems.
Exactly right.
And so do the small little municipalities in between there, who may not have 24 hours cops, who may not have a detective division. So how can a congressman help inform new laws to be able to help these guys out?
If you know the problem, you are a long way toward the answers. And if you, in Congress, take all of the pieces and parts of our government and you bring them together in a very systematic, logical, and meaningful way, that's the answer. And it is only the answer, Gary, if we can bring the community with us, because they are as much a part of this answer as any governmental agency. People used to say to me when I worked in the White House, gee, you know, you work for the president or you work in the White House, you know, you must have all the answers. You know what? There are no geniuses inside the Beltway. All of the great innovation, all of the answers to real problems that Americans have faced and solved have come from the community up, from the family, from the teachers and the coaches and the high schools, from the community activists, from the neighborhood associations. So now, sadly, that we have everybody's attention, and it's a shame it had to come to this with the heroin opioid problem and the fentanyl that's in the heroin, which is killing everybody. And now that everybody listening, watching our show, probably knows somebody either who is addicted, or sadly has passed away. You can't pick up a newspaper anymore and look at the obituaries and not see a picture of a young person.
Yes.
And that is tragic, and it's unforgivable. It's unforgivable for the violent drug dealers, and I know what to do with them because that's what I've done my whole life. And some families are brave enough, even in an obituary, to talk about the addiction because they want to help others prevent that. And some aren't, and that's okay either way. It's a very difficult situation. But let's gather all the pieces of government and all of the non-government entities, and if you send this cop to Congress, who's lived it, who's been a deputy drug czar for 2 presidents, I know what we need to do in prevention. And I could go to the Department of Education and formulate bills and bring together alliances to talk about real education that works with our kids where they are. If you're from an immigrant family and you speak Spanish, or you're from an affluent area and you go to a private school, and everybody in between, we have to tailor the educational message for our kids. And then treatment. We need to look at this drug issue, and this is the cop and prosecutor saying it, as a health crisis. Treat addiction for what it is. We're not excusing the behavior that got the person there, but once they're there, we don't need them in the criminal justice system.
Right.
It doesn't help them, and it just crowds up the jails and our whole criminal justice entity. What we need to do is force them into treatment. And yes, I said force, because there are only 2 other options, jail or a death certificate. And then lastly, working with the healthcare piece of this, being sure our insurance companies provide enough and sufficient treatment, inpatient treatment, to break this addiction and be able to manage a life going forward. And we treat people for cancer. The healthcare companies don't say, well, you'll only get 28 days of cancer treatment now, do they? No. And we need to ensure that there's the requisite treatment there. And then lastly, working with our doctors so they don't unknowingly overprescribe.
And that seems to be our biggest problem with it. I want to move in. In this election, you have 2 opponents on the Republican ticket. What sets you apart, and why do you think you're the best guy to take on Matt Cartwright in November for the 8th District seat?
Well, I'm the person that can hit the ground running on day one. Having worked in those 2 White Houses, I know how the Congress works, and I know how to bring all of those pieces we just talked about together, and that's only on one issue. Secondly, authenticity matters, and experience matters, and credibility matters. And if you look at congressmen now, say a Trey Gowdy, for those of our viewers that know him, he's only in his 3rd or 4th term, but because he arrived as a former assistant U.S. attorney, as I was, he has credibility, and he's given leadership positions in the Congress. He doesn't have to wait 20 years for seniority. So when a Joe Peters arrives in the Congress, I am of that cloth, already having worked in 2 White Houses. And my opponents don't have that. As we mentioned, one of them, John Schrin, lives in New Jersey. I mean, for God's sake, run where you live.
Right.
And then I think in terms of beating Matt Cartwright, I can beat Matt Cartwright because this is a new district. It's new to probably 40% of the people. He's new to them, and they're new to him. Maybe the most important factor of all, in Lackawanna and Luzerne County, I'm a known name for what I've done as a public servant for over 30 years. He's a Wall Street banker who's spending a pile of money to create an image and trying to let people think he's part of our community. And because I have that name ID and those qualifications, and people have seen me on television and heard me on radio and know what I'm about, I can get Democratic votes the same way that my dad, as a Republican mayor, got Democratic votes in a 3-to-1 Democratic city. So by winning Lackawanna County, which none of the others can do in the fall to beat Matt Cartwright, and winning in Luzerne County the same way, we will go on to victory. And it's less about another candidate. It's not about beating Matt Cartwright, though that will be the result. It's about a new person who's qualified to deal with today's issues, representing all of the people of this 8th Congressional District.
Staying with the 8th theme here, the 8th does lean a little bit more towards the D's than it does to the R's. As you said, you know, writing really, and how your dad did that in the city of Scranton. Is there a formula? Is there a plan how Joe Peters can get the 8th district to be more ours, to send a Republican to represent it?
You know what I found? That our voters in northeastern Pennsylvania and the Poconos are very reasonable people who care deeply not only about their families and their lives, but about who represents them. So when they look at somebody, they see through the negative, you know, underbelly kind of campaign. I mean, my opponent has mailed 2 mailers about me, negative mailers. And you know what he said? I worked for 6 attorneys general of Pennsylvania. One of them happened to be a Democrat. So he's trying to turn off Republican voters because of that. I worked for 2 presidents, you know, George W. Bush, and one happened to be a Democrat. Army generals don't say, I quit because the new president is of a different party. We have a mission and a mandate to serve our constituents. And I think when people look to who they're going to vote for, they vote for somebody they not only know, but that has a proven record of public service, not a Wall Street banker.
When you're elected to Congress, you said you can hit the ground running. In 100 days there, what are you looking to accomplish? What are you hoping to put Joe Peters' name on?
Well, I'm going to be looking at the heroin opioid crisis first, for the reasons that we talked about. But there are other issues. You know, at the top of the show, I talked about, you know, our police officers being assassinated. I've spent the last several years working on training protocols for law enforcement, not only to keep our cops and firefighters and EMS responders safe, but to work with the community so the community better understands the police and vice versa. I mentioned the homegrown terrorist issue. You know, the person who's in a hotel in the Las Vegas concert shooting people, that person could be, you know, at Hazleton High School at a football game tomorrow. And we need to focus on those issues. And then there are issues that are very important to me concerning veterans. You know, and I worked under a 4-star general, Purple Heart winner. It built in me, though I've never served as a soldier, when you serve as a cop, we see each other as brothers and sisters. And I know the problems they face, and not only when they're deployed and their families are left back home and we're not taking good enough care, but when they return and they're dealing with health care and a lack of access to the VA has to change. They're dealing with PTSD. We need to focus on it when they're serving overseas before they get back, and diminish it and minimize it there, not wait for them to return. I spent hours with a Gold Star family. They're wonderful people. They live in Carbon County, actually. It's not even in my district, but they care about the problem. They gave me a coin, a Gold Star family coin, which I carry with me to remind me of our commitment and the debt we owe to our soldiers. So that, and then another piece is our farm family community. You know, we forget in Pennsylvania that agriculture is our #1 industry. In rural Luzerne County and rural Lackawanna County, it's replete with farms who are trying to survive. And you know, the inheritance tax issue is forcing them to sell part of their farm to pay a tax because their parents wanted to pass it down to them. It's ludicrous. You know, we have regulations which say if your tractor makes a ditch and water accumulates, you have to get an EPA permit or a governmental permit or go through a regulatory process before you can do anything with that water. That is insane. So we have to get government out of the way of people's lives and to help them, not be an impediment. And the same with business. We have extraordinary universities. I went to King's in Luzerne County. My dad wasn't happy because he was the mayor of Scranton and the university is right there. But there's such brain power there, such innovation and technology, and we live in a corridor of highways and airports where we can be a hub of technology, and along with our hospital and healthcare systems, be a destination for people who want jobs and not scaring our college graduates and our other workers, the trades. Importantly, not everybody has to be a college grad. You know, be a plumber, an electrician, a truck driver. They're valuable skills in the Marcellus area and everywhere else.
and you touch on something there, and I want to go back for a moment with our communities and our schools, making sure that when we educate our students that they're staying here. We see a lot of times at the universities that they go in to great programs, and I think every college and university in Northeast PA has great programs, and they try their hardest to make sure everything's available to their students here. But what can we do really to get the students to go to those STEM programs that we need, and to make sure that they're staying here in Northeast Pennsylvania to help our job market grow and not, flourish at other places?
Right. We don't want to lose our talent. We don't want to lose our own. One of the great traditions we have here is sort of generations of families, that came here as lawful immigrants. And oh, by the way, I am for a border wall and fixing our immigration system, because that border, I worked on it. It was my responsibility at the White House years ago, before we had the problems we have today. That border is key to lawful immigration, which those that wait in line and do it the right way in this community and in this county and others, they deserve to have the respect that others should not sneak in. Plus, we don't know who's coming in. It's a great way for terrorists to come in here to cross that Mexican border. And it's guns and drugs and money laundering going in either direction. So let's, going back to your question, let's keep the community traditions based upon lawful immigrants going. Let's give our students a reason to stay and help their desire to stay, which they have. Most don't want to leave.
Yes.
So let's link our high schools and our colleges in the area, because we have so many colleges and universities. Let's link our trade schools and our high schools, so those that don't want to go to college can have a meaningful method of making a living. So let's bring together what we have rather than scaring people away.
We're getting down to the end of the show, and quickly I want to ask, before I give you time at the end, is Joe Peters going to be his own man in Washington, D.C.?
That's all I've ever done. You can't be a street cop and do the right thing and carry a gun and a badge and honor the law. You can't be the chief of Pennsylvania's Bureau of Narcotics and lead other agents into very dangerous situations if you're not your own man doing the right thing. You can't be the state's top drug prosecutor or a federal mafia prosecutor and not do the right thing, because the mob will buy you off, or they will kill you off, or scare you off. And none of that has ever scared me. And then you can't work for two presidents of the United States on the critical issues of the day and work around the world on terrorism, or the Fox News Channel ask you to come on and talk to people from around the world about the most important issues of the day if you're not your own man. Nobody owns me. Nobody can buy me. I'm going to do the right thing for my constituents here.
Joe, if somebody wants to learn more about you, where can they go?
Sure, they can go to joepeters.com. There's a great 2-minute video which talks a lot about the issues about which we spoke. That's the best place to start.
All right, well, we are coming down to the end. Remind people again to go out and vote, especially in the 8th District.
Please, it's a new district, it's a new game, it's a chance for us to start over. And to your viewers, I know that they don't work for me, I work for them. I can't do it without them. And May the 15th is the day that, please, we need you to show up. And I humbly ask every one of your viewers who's a registered Republican in this primary to vote for Joe Peters.
All right, Joe, thank you so much for coming on and letting everyone know where you stand. Again, May 15th is primary election day here in Pennsylvania. Make sure you get out to vote. You heard all about Joe here on the show, and you can learn more at joepeters.com. Thanks for joining us here on Topic, everyone. We'll see you next time.